Canary by Cloud9 and 3/4. Chapter 42. A Blessing in Disguise. 9 days since the return. Was Canary taking this thing with Bakugo and Shinso a little too far? Jiro wasn't sure, and it didn't seem like Canary was either. He was blatantly ignoring everyone, isolating himself, refusing to eat alongside anyone, studying in silence, not talking to... Actually, well, that wasn't that much different from normal, come to think of it. The main difference was him really not communicating with Shinso. Jiro had spied him signing with Koda that morning, but nothing more. Maybe Jiro was overthinking it. Maybe he just needed a little time to consider all this. Jiro didn't really see what he was freaking out about, though. Not at first, at least. But she could barely remember what Shinso had spilled. A little thought reminded her of one particular comment lodged in her mind.
That he thought he'd never amount to anything, and that he was the worthless, useless Deku that you made him out to be. You were the one who told him to go and commit suicide.
But what happened, really? Did Canary actually... No, Jiro didn't want to think about it. Not at all. Canary wasn't here right now. He was with Eri, according to Ida. Apparently, after she came back from her quirk evaluation of sorts with the police, things weren't all as good as they should have been. As soon as the little girl scampered into Heights Alliance, she immediately ran up to Yaoyorozu and asked for Canary. He carried her back down the stairs about an hour later, her face red from tears, as he hummed a familiar tune, one that Jiro couldn't quite place, in the girl's ear to hand her back over to Mr. Aizawa despite how displeased she seemed by the idea. So now, with her still being rather distraught after last night, Canary was spending this morning with her. He would be missing maths, but really Jiro didn't think it mattered that Canary, of all people, missed one maths lesson. Speaking of which, Jiro should really get going. Homeroom class was in 10 minutes, and it was safer to be early than facing Ida's wrath when she's almost not early. She was just listening to her music, ambling along towards the school when the tunes started to fade out. She groaned when she realized this was the telltale act of an incoming phone call. "Hello?" she answered groggily as she continued to walk, hoping she wouldn't lose signal. Or maybe hoping that she would if it was just a spam caller. "Hey, Al! It's me!" Jiro frowned and stopped in her tracks. Aozora? That's the one! Why are you... Let me get straight to the point. Did you listen to the radio last night? Honestly? No. Exactly! Wait, what? Jiro questioned, staring up at the sky in confusion. What does that mean for anything? You're not the only one not listening, my dear friend, Aozora continued. The distinct voice of rustling paper indicated that she was still in her office. It's like 8:15 in the morning. Why are you calling me? To fix this problem, Owl! Aozora laughed like it was obvious. Why do you think we've got such a decrease in listeners? What has happened that could have possibly resulted in this? Jiro continued walking, a little slower this time as she spoke. Well, Canary's not on the show anymore. Yes! Exclaimed Aozora. Now they realize that Canary won't be on the show for the foreseeable future. They're not going out of their way to listen. Aren't you just back to your listener account before Canary appeared then? Jiro acknowledged. Know a little about that. We seem to have gained some permanent listeners, but we've lost so many. We were doing so well, and now that growth is over. And I'm here to fix that. With me? Oh, yeah. With you. When you and Raven came on the show just over a week ago, we had a spike in listener count. It's younger people, you see. They want to hear what life is like for heroes their age. The people who will be the heroes of their generation. Plus, you sing, and your singing is like awesome. Jiro blushed terribly, which must have caught a few glances now that she was walking through the main building of UA up to her classroom. Thanks? So, yeah, I thought I'd call you now whilst I remember, and I'm pretty sure you're not in lessons yet. I haven't taken you out of classes, right? Because President Mike would kill me. No, I'm just walking to registration. But Aozora... Oh, good! Anyway, the idea came to me yesterday when I realized how much Thursday shows suck without any of the aria on. Tuesdays we can deal with, but Thursdays were always an issue before Canary showed up. So, here's the deal. You will be coming on instead of Canary in that Thursday slot, dragging along another one of your friends maybe every other week to spice things up with stuff. Of course, it would be incredibly useful for publicizing yourself in preparation for your heroic future. You'd be a big name by the time you debut. We wouldn't call it Canary's Hour or Owl's Hour or anything like that. I don't know about an official name. We'll have to wait and see. And we might also do a couple of trial weeks with you instead of hiring you straight away, just to see what happens before making a big commitment. You know, business and all that. But when we did it with Canary, it was a gamble worth making. We've been able to reach so many people with the money from... Wait! Aozora, stop! Jiro sighed, coming to a stop herself right outside the door to Class 1A, and now pacing back and forth in front of it. I feel like I'm kind of just replacing Canary here. On the other end of the phone, Aozora mimicked your sigh. Well, I can't say that you're wrong. But think of the bigger picture here. The money we earn from merchandising and advertising and all that goes toward helping other people. When the radio show is more popular, the White Noise team has more callers and they save more people. This isn't some big popularity contest, it's serious work. We may not be the most well-known hero division out there, but we do our part and make the lives of so many people so much better. If you can fill this gap on the radio, the statistics say that our listener count will go up again, and more people can be reached. Moreover, Canary won't be like this forever, give time, and he will heal. Then he can join you on the radio again. Maybe he can even have a permanent job here, considering he can't be a hero anymore. Jiro hesitated. Did you not hear? Yeah, what? I'm not sure if I'm supposed to tell you this, so don't tell anyone else. Oh, I promise! Give me those details! Jiro glanced around as if checking that no one could overhear, and she whispered into her phone's receiver. Canary got a provisional hero license? There was a moment of silence on the other end. What? I know! How the hell did that happen? I'll tell you later. I have homeroom right now. Jiro exclaimed, checking the time on her phone only to realize that Ida was about to get pretty mad at her. You better call me with an explanation and all the details. I will be waiting. I will, I promise. Jiro laughed. See you in like 8 hours. You expect me to sit here and wait for 8 hours? See you then. Well then, I better have an answer by then, Owl. I need... And so Jiro hung up, mainly because Mr. Aizawa had just appeared at the end of the corridor. Jiro quickly pocketed her phone and slid into Class 1A. Jiro! Ida called out, as expected. You're almost late. Yeah, I know. Jiro smiled, unable to hide the grin on her face as she sat down. However, it quickly faded when she caught sight of Shinso staring glumly at the empty seat in front of him where Canary should have been. Alright. Canary. How would he feel about Jiro taking his place at the radio? That show had changed his life. He loved it. They were all on thin ice already in terms of friendships. Would they be able to keep them at all if Jiro swooped in and took something so dear to Canary? Morning, class, mumbled Mr. Aizawa as he stumbled into view. There was a returning chorus of "Good morning, Mr. Aizawa" before the register began. Jiro wasn't the only one who tensed slightly at the thought of Canary again when his name was called out. The whole class dynamic was really messed up because of everything that had happened. And Jiro was just about to make it worse with the radio thing. She thought everything was getting better now that he had his hero license, but it had just raised more uncertainties. The school has something for you to start thinking about now, their teacher explained after registration was over, and he jotted down Canary's excuse of absence. You have a decent amount of time to plan and sort it out, and the venue is available to start setting everything up in about a month's time. He blinked at his class, noting the worried expressions on their faces, including Jiro's. That was when he must have realized he hadn't actually detailed what he was on about. Oh, the culture festival is coming up. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. It was just an ordinary school thing. Not at all like the chaos UA's version of a sport festival brought with it. Here, each and every class would put on their own little event. It was less of a festival for the hero course and designed more to play into the hands of the business course and the support course. The support students could show off their creations to potential investors, whilst business students could work on their entrepreneur skills, either working alongside the support course or setting up their own stalls. For the hero course and general studies, however, it was just a time for them to have a little fun. Trust Ida to make it anything but. We should decide on a theme now in order to optimize the time we have to prepare and perfect it. he insisted loudly, now standing before the class with Yaoyorozu by his side, whilst Mr. Aizawa slid into his yellow sleeping bag indifferently. The class representatives started going around the room to ask for suggestions, and most were pretty unlikely. Bakugo's suggestion of a deathmatch, for example. Ida and Yaoyorozu themselves weren't much help either, considering most of them chose rather studious options. Jiro's mind, however, was in a different place. She felt tremendously guilty taking Canary's spot on the radio station, but they might be so amazing! Singing on the radio every Thursday evening, it was like a dream come true! Something she would fantasize about as a little girl, becoming a hero and a musician all at once! She would even get more followers than before, but this time it would be Earphone Jack! Or maybe just Jack as a nickname! It wouldn't just be because she was one of Canary's friends and was occasionally a guest or co-host that was brought in. She would actually be a starring member of the cast. Ah! Just imagine what it would be like, but... What about you, Jiro? Ida called out, realizing she was the only one who hadn't suggested something yet, apart from Canary, of course, who wasn't there. She replied, realizing that she had been daydreaming this whole time and hadn't actually considered what would be a good plan for this culture festival thing. Open mic comedy? She suggested unsurely. Not that she would actually want to do that, but the word mic was on her mind, and that was simply what followed. However, the suggestion was quickly ditched as Ida and Yaoyorozu went through their collected ideas. None of them really seemed to fit what they wanted, and they were quickly running out of time. Before long, Mr. Aizawa emerged from his cocoon-like sleeping bag and announced that they were indeed out of time. Mr. Ectoplasm had arrived for their morning mathematics lessons, and they still hadn't come up with anything suitable.
You have a week to come up with an idea,
Mr. Aizawa explained as he slowly trudged away.
The quicker you come up with one, the more time you have to prepare. Fail to do any of that, though, and we'll be doing a regular class open house.
No one seemed particularly keen on that idea.
Jiro wondered what Canary would have suggested.
Hey! Isn't this my favorite student?
Midoriya blinked up from the puzzle he was helping Eri complete to see President Mike
Bursting in through the door.
Eri pointed at him.
Cockatoo.
A moment of stunned silence passed until
President Mike burst out in laughter. How did you teach her that without being able to speak?
He exclaimed, pointing
accusingly at Midoriya.
He looked down at the puzzle and carefully placed the piece he was holding right into the middle of the picture, which was a life-size rendition of, yes, a cockatoo.
You have the hair,
Eri sniffed, pointing up at President Mike's outrageous hairdo and then back to the iconic fluff of the bird in her puzzle. President Mike looked like he was going to well up now that both his children had separately come to the same conclusion of him being a cockatoo.
Does she have a bird name?
President Mike signed eagerly to Midoriya. Bluebird.
Did your friend Rebecca come up with that one too?
Midoriya shook his head and pointed to himself. President Mike laughed to himself softly as he pulled up another chair to the table that Eri and Midoriya were sitting in. They were in the staff room, which was rather empty at this time of day, considering most of the teachers were busy teaching lessons. Midoriya was pretty sure President Mike should have been hosting a class at this point as well, but he decided not to point it out.
So, little listener,
President Mike began after clearing his throat. Both were watching Eri quietly mull over which piece of puzzle would slot in this tantalizingly empty gap near the cockatoo's head.
How's the hero course going?
Fine, Midoriya signed back simply, passing Eri another piece from the pile of unused pieces that she couldn't quite reach herself.
Just fine! You've had your first hero lessons now, right? Were they great or what?
Midoriya just shrugged, straightening the corner pieces a little and not meeting the hero's gaze.
Something happened, huh?
He quickly concluded.
Is it friendship troubles?
The slight stiffening of Midoriya's shoulders must have been what gave it away.
Well, you've always got shit, so you two have been like birds of a feather since the start of the year.
Midoriya sighed deeply and turned to President Mike with a look in his eyes that most likely explained everything. President Mike stared over the top of his glasses back at him.
Your friendship troubles are with Shinso!
Dejectedly, Midoriya nodded.
How?
His teacher exclaimed, catching the attention of Eri for a moment before she returned to her puzzle, which was clearly far more interesting.
How can you have an argument without even speaking? Wait, was this in sign language? Does anyone else know?
No, that's the problem.
No one knowing is the problem?
No, everyone knows everything. That's the problem. When I was gone, Raving Up had an explosion and said some stuff about me that I really didn't want anyone else knowing yet.
And I'm guessing explosion is Bakugo?
He nodded, slotting another puzzle piece into place for Eri.
Okay! Is there some history between you and Bakugo then?
He felt his shoulders tense again.
It's okay, you don't have to explain.
President Mike added hurriedly.
But if you wanted to talk about it, I'm all ears.
Midoriya wavered, looking up at his teacher unsurely.
He sighed. I just don't know all of Class A as much as they know me, and I find it unsettling. Maybe it's a good thing that they know everything that happened, but I wasn't ready for that yet. I understand that Raven lost his cool. I get that they thought I was dead, but they were still secrets that I didn't want anyone else knowing. And that's not fair on me. Or Explosion.
President Mike didn't reply for a moment, and instead passed Eri another piece to complete the picture before them. Can I learn the secret hand language? She asked suddenly.
President Mike beamed. Well, you've got the two best teachers you can ask for. What do you want to know?
Midoriya lost the entirety of his math lesson to teaching Eri sign language and then all of RE too. The class would have been well into their Japanese lesson by the time Mr. Aizawa walked over to tell Midoriya he should probably head back to Class 1A now. He'd arrived hours ago, but just decided not to disturb them. Midoriya was also quite sure that Midnight had been taking pictures of him from across the room. He wouldn't be too surprised if they ended up in Aozora's possession. President Mike ended up walking him back to class, mainly because Midoriya had the sneaking suspicion he had wanted to talk to him about something this entire time.
So, do you remember much about what our wonderful principal Mazu said in the start of term assembly not that long ago?
President Mike began as soon as they'd left the staff room. Midoriya gave him a look.
Well, yes, it does tend to go on a bit. Anyways, have any of your classmates started work studies this term yet?
Midoriya frowned. Yeah, he remembered the term work studies being thrown around in that assembly, but he didn't think about it further. Mr. Aizawa said that they might have some third-year students come in and talk about them later that week.
Well, I thought I jumped the gun a bit. Blame Aozora! She said it was only fair that you'd be offered another opportunity after... Oh, wait. You're not really talking to your friends at the moment, are you?
Midoriya's confusion simply intensified. President Mike cleared his throat awkwardly.
Anyway, work studies can only be held in a place with a good track record, preferably where you did your internship. And there's no better place for you than my place to do that. You need the practice to catch up with your classmates anyway.
Midoriya blinked.
Wait, are you offering me a work study?
Yeah! Not many of so stuff, I'm afraid. That unfortunately kind of revolves around speaking. But the white noise team would have a place for you. Static said he was happy to have you around. I was going to offer it to Shinzo too, but maybe just you for now then.
Midoriya wavered, trying to mull the offer over in his mind. He hadn't really explained it well. But, well, a hero without a quirk wouldn't get an opportunity much better than this elsewhere.
Are you really sure?
I wouldn't be offering it if I weren't.
Midoriya beamed.
Come on, high five, little co-host. Just because you can't sing doesn't mean you can't fly.
And so Midoriya threw himself into a hug outside the grand door to Class 1A. President Mike huffed as he hugged him back.
Am I ever going to actually get a high five when I ask for one?
Damn it, Midoriya still wouldn't talk to him. Shinzo ground his teeth in frustration, staring at his English work. The foreign words moved around before his eyes. He tore his gaze away from them, resting it on the back of Midoriya's head instead. Siren was nestled amongst his hair. Mr. Aizawa was taking her to the vet's that evening to remove her bandages. Shinso wasn't sure if he was looking forward to having that racket on the loose again, especially when he was on Midoriya's bad side, if he had one at all, because that most likely translated to Siren's bad side, and that was something she most definitely had. That look in her beady black eyes seemed to confirm it. She must have sensed that Midoriya wasn't too happy with Shinso, because she was currently staring at him from Midoriya's green head of hair, a hint of vengeance in that look of hers. Shinso could almost hear her thoughts. You make my humans sad? You're next. Yeah, there was definitely something wrong with that bird. Favorite student! President Mike called out. Midoriya perked up because there was no denying President Mike's favoritism at this point. Collecting the papers, would ya? The spelling quiz is over! If Shinso and Midoriya hadn't been on bad terms, Shinso probably would have gotten up ahead of him to pick up the papers, babbling on about being the favorite, whilst Midoriya stifled his laughter in the corner. Back in reality, Shinso blinked down at his work. Ah, shoot! He'd hardly answered anything, but he knew that one! But as he put his pen back down on his paper, Midoriya snatched it out from underneath him without a second glance in his direction. Hey! Shinso called back at him. Midoriya ignored him and the ugly blue line of ink that Shinso's pen left behind as he pulled the quiz away. As he collected the rest of the tests, everyone stewed in their own thoughts. Shinso didn't know what to do. Was there a way to make it up to him? He'd never considered something like this would happen as a result of trying to get back at Bakugo. And honestly, was Midoriya taking this a little too far? Shinso understood why he was mad, and if he were in that situation, maybe he would have been too. But what was this pettiness really achieving? If not making everything worse for everyone. The rest of the day passed by quickly. Shinso hadn't seen Midoriya at all during lunch. He'd appeared mid-morning, partway through Japanese, vanished immediately after art, only to turn up again later for afternoon registration and then the rest of the day's lessons. Shinso was planning on trying to talk to Midoriya when the day ended, but as soon as it did, he chucked his things into his bag and stormed off. Shinso reckoned he was really using Eri as an excuse to exclude himself at this point. Now they were back in the dorms. The sun was starting to set, and Ida and Yaoyorozu had decided that they should really get this culture festival thing over and done with now. Yaoyorozu had made one of those massive sheets of paper and had recreated a large list of ideas, most of which they'd composed earlier in homeroom, but quite a few new ones had been added since then. Now, I don't think any of the food ideas would work, she continued, gazing at the list thoughtfully. Everything would be compared to Lunch Rush's food. Yeah, sorry, Sato, but even you can't measure up to Lunch Rush quite yet, Zero added with no remorse.
And if it's okay with everyone else, I think we should cross out the haunted house as well,
said Ida.
Aw, but why?
Gakare pouted, who was the one who suggested the idea.
Because the last time that we participated in a test of courage of sorts, it did not end the way we had hoped.
Silence fell over the room, and a few glanced awkwardly towards Bakugo, who didn't seem that bothered anyway.
I'd hate to bring up bad memories for some of our party,
Ida explained awkwardly. I'd like to scare the hell out of Class B, Bakugo interjected confidently. Never got the chance.
It wasn't you who I was referring to, Bakugo,
Ida replied. The others glanced around the room in search for the person that their class representative was actually talking about. Hey, where is Midoriya anyway? Questioned Kirishima with a frown. With Eri, Shinso quickly answered with a tone as bitter as his coffee. No one talked for a few moments afterwards, all deep in their own thoughts about Midoriya. Is there any way we can make it up to him? Voiced Uraraka, who was clearly thinking along the same lines as Shinso. But Shinso had really had enough by this point. It's clear that he doesn't want us to make it up to him, and that's fine by me, he lied, taking a sip of his drink to distract himself with the taste.
I think there's just a lot of stuff going on for him at the moment,
Ida interjected, ignoring Shinso's comment.
He needs some time to think it all over and assert his place in our class.
There were a lot of things Shinso could have said to that. He decided not to say anything at all in the end.
He's probably pretty stressed,
Suyu acknowledged, tapping her finger against her lip like she always did when she was about to bring up a well-thought-out point.
It's been 9 days since he came back, and he's already got his hero license, and has been thrown right into class with the rest of us. He's trying to look after Eri and make sure his mother's okay. Understand, like you said, his place in our group, and he's got a surgery for his mouth in a few days now, Ribbit. It must be really hard. How long has he had that injury now?
Mina wondered aloud, sinking into the sofa as she snuggled into her jacket.
A month or so?
22 days since Camino, was the unexpected knowledge from Bakugo. Well, perhaps it should have been expected. That was when he was rescued. Not quite a month then, said Todoroki, but that's still a long time.
It must really be sad, Rebecca continued, for someone with a singing quirk to not be able to sing.
Sirens fell over them again.
Why did their conversations always boomerang back to Midoriya?
But then Jiro perked up. Well then, why don't we sing?
Wait, for the culture festival?
Questioned Rebecca, sitting up a little straighter in her chair next to Suyu.
Yeah, like a band kind of thing,
she suggested awkwardly. Hagakure gasped loudly. Her onesie was jumping up and down in the air, so Shinzo could only assume the invisible girl was doing the same.
Oh, you can teach us all instruments! You're such a good teacher!
Jiro flushed red.
Well, I don't know about everyone. Maybe just a few of us in the band itself? I don't know. It was just a silly idea.
Wait, no!
Mina exclaimed, suddenly leaping to her feet.
What if the rest of us danced?
Singing and dancing, Shinzo repeated with a raised eyebrow. No thanks. Jiro rolled her eyes. I can teach you the guitar riffs for whatever song we end up using. Shinzo hesitated. Well, if they were going to do this, then that was the only place he was happy sliding into. He shrugged. Fair enough.
I think it's a wonderful idea,
Ida announced eagerly.
Not only would it be a great thing for Midoriya, but it could show our support to the other departments as well. After all, it is our class which has attracted all these villain attacks and attention to the school. Because of us, the Culture Festival has to be closed off to all but certified visitors. By having this show, we could help the other students of UA relax a little more. Being a hero isn't just about defeating the villains in the end.
The class was buzzing with ideas surrounding their chosen event, but that was suddenly brought to a dramatic and displeasing end by, of course, Bakugo.
It's not gonna work,
he said, his feet upon the table as he stared at the ceiling.
Why not?
Jiro replied, putting her hands on her hips in frustration.
Because, first of all, Deku's not gonna want to see any of you singing and prancing around while you straight up, and you already know,
he pointed out rudely.
That's on me, no one else,
Shinzo replied, glaring at his now empty cup of coffee with the menace that he would have directed at Bakugo if he didn't know it would make things worse.
Whatever,
Bakugo huffed.
When it comes down to it, is reminding him of the one thing he can't do anymore really going to make it feel better?
There was a moment of silence.
Since when did you care?
Was Mina's harsh interjection. Bakugo stood up and glared at her, probably about to say something equally, if not more, harsh in response.
Guys, can we not?
Kaminari sighed.
Like, seriously, all we do is argue recently.
He's right, added Kirishima. It's the last thing we all need. Especially Canary.
Well then, said Ida, clearing his throat, I think we all need to be aware of how delicate Midoriya's situation is. But first things first, are we inviting him to take part in this as a class to help strengthen our friendship with him again? Or is this going to be a surprise? I think it should be a surprise,
Mina exclaimed, jumping up again and punching the air.
I'll teach you all to dance! I used to be in the same class as Canary, and then Jiro can head the band team! Well, he'll find out about the Culture Festival eventually, and ask us what we're doing.
As we pointed out, asking us could prove to be an issue. Shinzo huffed. They ignored him.
Then if he asks, we'll tell the truth. Then it's a surprise for him.
Araraka agreed, getting out of her seat as she got about as excited as Ashino, if that were possible. Todoroki sat down next to Shinzo with another cup of coffee, which he gladly accepted.
This is going to go horribly wrong,
he sighed. Todoroki just nodded. It might not, though.
How would you know?
I could ask you the same question. Shinzo hesitated and sighed.
I guess so.
Oh, we've got to do a song in English, like what Canary does, yeah? Suggested Hagakure eagerly.
Something upbeat and easy to dance to,
Added Mina. They were throwing ideas left and right now. Shinzo tried not to involve himself too much, mainly so he could stand back with his hands in the air when things inevitably went wrong, and he could say, well, he didn't have anything to do with it, it wasn't his fault. It probably wasn't the best motto in life, but in a situation as delicate as this, he was more than happy to take a few steps back. They were nowhere near finished with the planning when they decided to stop there because Shoji spotted Midoriya on his way over with Eri. All Shinzo knew was that he'd somehow been lumped in the musical theme with Jiro and a few others. Bakugo was still refusing to do anything, as helpful as always.
Hi, Canary!
Uraraka called out when he walked in. Yaoyorozu had already hurried upstairs to hide their planning poster, and everyone had started milling around to
Act natural.
Sato was absent-mindedly reading a random page in a cookery book. Kaminari and Kirishima were arguing over which channel the TV should be on, so it ended up on the news. Mina, who hadn't really caught the drift, was trying to teach Aoyama how to dance, which was rather entertaining to watch, actually. Midoriya waved back meekly as he helped Eri take off her shoes. She immediately hurried into the center of the common room area, her eyes darting around in search for someone who was very clearly in the top 3 people she trusted in the school. Where's Mama? She questioned worriedly as she failed to locate Yaoyorozu.
She'll be right back,
Uraraka insisted.
Want to sit with me whilst we wait?
Eri insistently shook her head, running back over to Midoriya. Shinzo grinned at Uraraka's disappointed expression. Favoritism, he muttered. He glanced at Midoriya, only to realize he was signing, but not to him. We're tired. She's going to the vet's and I'm looking after Bluebird whilst he's gone, he told Goda. He seemed a little confused. Sorry, I don't know what your sign names mean. Tired is Mr. Aizawa and Eri is Bluebird, Shinzo said over his shoulder, looking away as he did so. Not that it would make a difference. Midoriya would know that he was watching him, or else he wouldn't have known what he signed. Why is Mr. Aizawa tired? Scoffed Ojiro with a slight smile upon his face. Because he's always tired, Shinzo replied, raising an eyebrow as he did so. Wait, I'm confused, Kaminari frowned. Sero laughed. I'm confused. Don't you freaking dare! Their sign names, Shinzo sighed. He was vaguely aware that Midoriya was still talking, well, signing, to Koda, but he knew better than to keep watching and intruding. Sign names? Repeated Todoroki in apparent bewilderment. Shinzo stared at him in surprise. Has this seriously never come up in conversation before?
No, what are sign names?
Questioned Jiro. Shinzo sighed. You can't say normal names in sign. There isn't a specific sign for Jiro or Todoroki. You can use kanji meanings, I guess, but that's boring and sometimes a little confusing. So you just assign random signs or words to different people, and those are sign names. What do you think the bird names are for?
Wait!
Uraraka exclaimed.
That's the purpose of the bird names?
Yeah, replied Shinzo, still rather shocked that they hadn't realized this yet.
Oh, what's mine?
Mina asked excitedly, bounding over to him. I have literally never attempted saying your name in sign, he answered blatantly.
Aww!
She exclaimed in disappointment. Uraraka was now comforting Mina by suggesting numerous bird names to her. Now Yaoyorozu was busy talking with Eri about the bunny hero on TV, Mirko, and the rest of the class had descended to their usual form of
Chaos!
That was when Shinzo caught the sight of Midoriya starting to head over towards the stairs as he shouldered his backpack again. Go talk to him, insisted Todoroki, removing the cup of coffee from Shinzo's hands in an attempt to get him to go. Easier said than done, with Midoriya, of all people, Shinzo said, rolling his eyes. Yeah, but you're at a stalemate. He won't communicate with you and you won't with him. It'll spiral out of control if you don't at least try and make a difference. Todoroki explained, drinking his own coffee whilst still denying Shinzo his. But he doesn't want. Just try, he sighed. As you said, it's on you. As in, he won't talk to any of us if it won't talk to you. At least that's what Shinzo was pretty sure Todoroki was getting at. He sighed, glancing over at the others talking about the heroes on the news with Eri, and then left them to it, hurrying up the stairs to his floor. Midoriya, of course, had his room right next to Shinso. The door was shut, and Shinso wavered before it. "Knock, knock," he said out loud. There came no reply, obviously. "I'm going to guess you just signed Who's There. You're already doing better than staying, I've got to admit," Shinso said with a slight laugh and a shrug. Midoriya still didn't emerge. "The punchline is you punching me," Shinso sighed, kicking at the ground, his hands in his pockets. "I was a jerk, I get it, I know. But with the risk of sounding exactly like Bakugo, the past's in the past. What I did was wrong, but there's nothing I can do to change that now. I remember when I lashed out, back when you were missing, Bakugo said that during the sports festival, you'd said that, well, all my life I'd been called a villain whilst he was the hero, but they gotten it the wrong way around." Shinso heard him move inside his room. The clattering of a plate on his desk, well, that's what it sounded like. Was he eating dinner? Or maybe a really late lunch or something? He heard him come to a stop just behind the door. Shinso struggled to continue. "Words are hard, okay? You know that. And it all just spilled out when you weren't here. I know, well, I don't because you still haven't said anything about it to us. But I'm sure you were having a far worse time than us, but we were still taking it pretty hard. Bakugo had a go at me for moping around. It was the first night at the dorms, and I'd never really spoken with him before, so I kind of lashed out. I shouldn't have said those things. Not just for your sake, but for Bakugo's too. He'd been going through a tough time as well, and I screwed it up even more. I'm sorry." The door creaked open. Midoriya wasn't wearing his mask. He had that plastic plug thing in his cheeks, so he must have been eating then. Perhaps he was eating an early dinner up here rather than having to eat with the rest of them down in the common room area. Shinso faltered. He took his hands out of his pockets, raising them as if he was about to sign something, whilst he took in a breath to speak. But defeated, he let them flop to his sides as he breathed out again. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what else I can say." Midoriya didn't say anything for a moment. He just stood there, staring. A couple of seconds passed, and he actually started to well up. "Are you crying?" Shinso gaped. "Mom?" he repeated with a sniff because he couldn't say no properly. That just made Shinso laugh. Midoriya murmured something indecipherable, which ended in a word that sounded like funny, so Shinso could only assume he'd said, "It's not funny." He rubbed his eyes, but in vain, as the tears poured down his face. "Are you okay?" Shinso questioned hesitantly, taking a cautious step forwards as the door swung open properly. He had his face buried in his hands as he shook his head. "Okay, just..." Shinso grabbed Midoriya's shoulders and turned him around, stirring him back into his room to plonk him down on the bed whilst he took the discarded chair to sit opposite him. "Right. Okay. Did you want to talk, or..." He quickly took his hands away from his eyes, blinking furiously at him. Shinso was trying not to stare at the great piece of plastic filling the hole in his face. "What is wrong with me?" He sighed in apparent frustration, his hands shiny with tears as more streamed down his face. Shinso stammered, unsure of how to reply. "I can't stop crying," he explained, now sobbing hysterically. "It won't stop." "Do you want a hug?" Shinso asked, laughing unsurely. "Yeah," Midoriya whined, and so Shinso moved from the chair to the space on the bed beside him and let Midoriya wrap his arms around him and weep loudly into his shoulder. "See, this is what happens when your emotional support bird leaves for 0.2 seconds. Shinso sighed, patting him on the head where Siren should have been sitting if she wasn't at the vet's. Midoriya laughed slightly, pulling away as he tried to wipe the tears away again. "I think I'm just..." Midoriya hesitated, his hands hovering in midair as he tried to think of the right word to say. "Tired." You're Mr. Aizawa. Midoriya punched him in the shoulder. You know what I mean! Tired as in you really need some sleep? Shinso queried, grinning because he knew that the look Midoriya was giving him was one that asked why he, of all people, was asking that question.
Not partially, he admitted. I'm just tired of everything.
He exaggerated the sign of that last word considerably. And it's all come crashing down. Shinso nodded in realization, running his hand through his hair. He needed to put some more gel in it. It tended to flap down a bit in the evenings.
I'm sorry, Midoriya continued. I reacted. I just got rather hung up about it all, I guess.
You didn't overreact. Shinso sighed, thinking back to what the others had said earlier. You've got a lot of stuff on at the moment. He raised his hands to count off the list on his fingers. You've got Eri to look after, your quirk to figure out, hero classes to catch up on, your mother to consider, normal classes on top of that, and then friendships, which made everything worse. Midoriya had finally stopped crying now. He brushed the last tears away from his red eyes with a loud sniff.
I suppose you're right.
There was a moment of silence whilst Midoriya shakily rummaged through the drawers near his bed to locate a pack of tissues, of which he hastily used most of them. Do you want to head back downstairs? Asked Shinso. Midoriya shook his head as he threw the crumpled paper into the waste paper basket near his door.
I don't want Bluebird to see me looking all upset.
You don't need to revolve everything you do around Eri.
I know,
He shrugged, sitting back down.
but I will.
Shinso failed to stifle his laughter. That's just like you, isn't it? Come on, Canary. Give yourself a break.
I will when I'm dead,
He joked, smiling deviously. I can help with that. Shinso deadpan, raising an eyebrow. This reminded him of his conversation with Jiro. What were they turning this innocent little bird into? Midoriya just laughed, rubbing at his face again before signing,
I need my emotional support bed.
That you do. Shinso scoffed. When will she be back?
Not that long,
He shrugged.
tired. The teacher said it depends on the traffic and how many people stop him asking about Siren.
Shinso grinned. Have you ever thought about how the name Siren isn't only a reference to a mythical creature that lures you to your death with its singing, but also like a really loud alarm bell? Midoriya blinked at him for a moment before bursting into laughter. I honestly can't think of a better name for her. Shinso continued, giggling slightly alongside Midoriya. Right, has your face stopped leaking yet? Midoriya pouted and nodded, sniffing one last time. Okay, we're going downstairs, Shinso insisted, standing up. And if you say no, I'm rolling you up in your new bed like a freaking sushi roll and handing you over to the mercy of a baraka. He laughed and got to his feet, grabbing his masks from beside the bowl of half-finished, and now rather cold, ramen that he'd abandoned. He didn't bother taking out his cheek piece, suggesting that he was planning on coming back up here to eat soon. That or he'd completely forgotten. The latter was quite likely. Good choice. Shinso grinned, opening the door wide for him as they walked out. They started trotting down the stairs in silence. Shinso was thinking about how Midoriya would react to this culture festival thing, which he was now feeling a little keener on, now that they were on good terms again. He wasn't sure what Midoriya's mind was pondering, but that didn't really matter because both of them were yanked from their thoughts about halfway down those stairs with the sound of a very loud, ear-piercing scream! The scream of a little girl! Shinso turned to Midoriya, who had stopped in his tracks, eyes wide. Both came to the same conclusion at the same time. Eri! Midoriya took off down the stairs milliseconds later with Shinso close behind him. He bounded down, 2 at a time, sometimes more, risking a fall as he desperately charged down towards the common room area where he had left Eri under the care of the others. He skidded to a halt when the sight came into view, and the puzzle pieces of the event very quickly slotted into place. The entire class had very quickly backed away, judging by the dropped cups of tea and coffee in the chairs, tossed hastily aside. In the middle of it all was Eri, sobbing hysterically on the armchair that she had been perched on with Yaoyorozu not long ago. She was crying and screaming, her hands pulling at the waterfalls of white hair around her as a strange, powerful energy reverberated from her. And then Midoriya's eyes settled on the TV screen, and the stern face of Overhaul. What's going on? Shinso exclaimed, pushing past him by accident as Midoriya's eyes became transfixed on that evil man's face. It was a news report of sorts, stating that the villain was dangerous and on the run. There must have been some kind of action against him earlier that day, resulting in a public warning. But Midoriya didn't care about that at the moment, mainly because Canary had hastily turned off the television and Midoriya found himself blinking at the blank screen, like he had been hypnotized by the horrendous memories that had resurfaced.
Midoriya?
Shinso questioned, shaking his shoulders gently as Midoriya shook his head. That was weird. Wait. Eri. He needed to focus on Eri. He pulled himself away from his friend's grip and hurried towards the group, only to have Ida stop him again.
Her quirk is dangerous, Midoriya.
Shinso! Yaoyorozu called out. Try and use your quirk on her. Right. Shinso hurried back into view, pushing to the front of the crowd of anxious students, feeling helpless as they watched the poor girl's power grow wild and out of control, pulsing gold around that horn of hers which seemed to be growing.
Eri, can you hear me?
Shinso called out to her. But Eri didn't reply. She just continued to wail like a banshee, curled up in a ball and shaking. Shinso persisted to ask her questions, none of which she answered. Her power only grew stronger. Ida had let go of Midoriya, and now he was scrambling for his phone in an attempt to contact Mr. Aizawa, who Midoriya knew wasn't going to be here on time. Her quirk. It looked like it was hurting her. All Midoriya knew about the power was that it was dangerous, that overall had some use for it. And for a villain like him, with access to bullets that could destroy quirks, well, Midoriya could only guess, but his estimations were rather accurate in his mind. And now, with her big red eyes submerged in her tears, she raised her trembling head to meet Midoriya's panicked gaze. That look was a plea, a cry for help that Midoriya simply could not ignore. Who better to step in than the only one in that class whose quirk was beyond their reach anyway? Canary, stop! Jiro yelled. He hurried forwards before anyone could try and stop him and hesitated just before the little girl. Her quirk sent a shiver down through his spine. It quickened his breath and strengthened his pulse. Or maybe that was just his nerves. No! Eri sobbed when she truly realized that Midoriya was too close. No! Go away! Go away! I don't want to hurt you! I'm dangerous! Midoriya's hand hovered before her. There were people yelling in the background. Shinso still desperately trying to get Eri to activate his quirk. Ida now trying to contact Midnight, and several others attempting to reach Midoriya, but in fear of what Eri could do, persisted to stay as far back as possible. I'm a curse, Eri whimpered, hugging her knees against her chest as the horn on the side of her head continued to grow. Chisaki will come for me. He'll come for you. You have to get away. Midoriya ignored her. He took a deep breath and pulled her close to him, hugging her tight. She cried even louder. No! Stop! Now that tingling through his body most certainly wasn't the product of adrenaline. Something about Eri's power shot through his veins and his nerves, a shooting pain that persisted the longer he held on. Biting through, he did the only thing he could and hummed the tune that had grown familiar to her. It couldn't hold the power that Midoriya's own quirk would have taken from it, but nonetheless, the song was now associated with safety, calm, serenity. Midoriya had made sure of such. Midoriya had learnt to give words and sounds power, with or without his quirk. Whatever Eri's quirk was doing to him, though, it was starting to become unbearable. As her own tears diminished and she melted into his touch, his began to prick at the corners of his eyes. His teeth were gritted behind his mask, biting down so hard that his entire mouth began to numb. Or perhaps that was due to Eri's power. It felt like a lifetime, but it was only to the end of the chorus, when Eri's quirk finally stopped. Midoriya let go of Eri and slumped backwards, the world spinning before him. The others descended upon the pair immediately. Yaoyorozu grabbed Eri without fear, tilting her head away from Midoriya as she embraced her and lifted her from the chair. It was Uraraka who caught Midoriya, though. That he was only sure of because of the weight of the world, which quite literally lifted off his shoulders at her touch. Soft and gentle. Canary! Canary! Canary, wake up! Midoriya's eyes shot back open before they were fully closed. He's bleeding! Someone get a first aid kit!
What happens? What did her quirk do?
I don't know. Midoriya, Hey, Midoriya!
He blinked furiously. Shinso was clicking his fingers before his eyes, trying to get him to snap out of the strange dozy state he found himself in. He sat bolt upright, breathing erratically as he came to grips with what had just happened.
Midoriya, breathe.
Shinso practically commanded. He was kneeling down in front of him, Uraraka was still supporting him from behind. Did he pass out? He didn't, right? What happened? The villains didn't react like that at all when they were shot with those bullets. He stumbled to his feet, ignoring the protests of the others and accidentally pushing Uraraka away. About half the class was surrounding him, whilst the rest were with Yaoyorozu and Eri.
Don't go over to her,
said Shinso, holding him back before he could even consider doing so.
You're bleeding, and she's still panicking.
Quark! Midoriya barely managed to sign.
She stopped. She's fine, just scared,
Shinso insisted. Midoriya took a few steps back. Wait, he was bleeding? Where? Lifting his hands to his face, he felt the damp of his mask. His hand came away red. His cheek, right over his injury, was oozing red. He should probably go to the bathroom to check that. But then he felt something get lodged in his throat. He stumbled forwards with a cough, a hand on the back of the sofa to hold him steady as he began to choke. The others cried out in surprise, reaching forwards perhaps to catch him if he fell again. No, he was going to be sick. Midoriya pushed them away and took off to the bathroom at a run. He slammed the door shut behind him, latching it closed, and then practically collapsed over the nearest sink. He stood there for a moment, shaking as his arms took his weight above the sink. Whatever was in his throat had moved. It was back in his mouth now. It was just that plastic cheek prosthetic thing. It must have been knocked out when he fell. There was a mirror on the wall above the sink. Ignoring whoever was knocking at the bathroom door, Midoriya raised his gaze to his reflection. Yep, the blue fabric of the mask was stained a much darker color with his blood. Great, this was going to have to go over his head. Able to steady himself on his feet now, he gave in to pulling the thing off. He chucked it in the sink and turned on the tap. The sound of running water must have reassured the person on the other side of the bathroom door because they stopped attacking the doorknob. Midoriya spat out the cheek piece along with disgustingly red-colored spit. He winkled his nose and wiped his face with the back of his arm. It came away red. Great. He sighed. Ugh. Was there something else in his mouth? Something felt unnatural there. Maybe a piece of the mask? Oh no, please don't say he'd bitten off part of his cheek. Ugh. Oh no! And he tried to spit it out, which didn't seem to work. That meant he resorted to trying to fish whatever it was out with his fingers, which also failed. Wait. Midoriya met the eyes of his reflection again. Taking his fingers out of his mouth, he leaned in a little closer to the mirror. He tilted his head slowly to one side. The blood was definitely coming from his cheek, but raising a hand to it, he tried to wipe away the red, which only made him wince. It was like his face had cracked. No, it looked exactly like it did when Stain injured him. Wait, there's no hole there. There's no hole. Where's the hole? Where's the... Midoriya, with wide eyes, slowly opened his mouth, and there was his tongue. He stumbled backwards, hands over his mouth upon reflex. Oh my god, he said, aloud, with no difficulties. He could speak.
Midoriya?
That was Shinso, on the other side of the door. Midoriya was now pacing back and forth in the bathroom, the tap still running as he tried to get his head around this. He suddenly had a tongue again. His cheek almost completely healed. Oh, wait! He skidded to a halt by the sink, again to gaze in the mirror. It was like his body had been teleported back in time to how it had been like after the Hosu attack. He'd been reversed? She could rewind someone! That's how she could remove quirks, reversing them back to before they'd manifested.
Had she done that to Midoriya, or had the power just focused on his injuries?
He cast his attention back to reality. He could just hear Eri's cries, still continuing back in the common room. His song!
If his quirk worked again, he could properly calm her down.
Wait, he was still covered in blood. He rushed into the nearest bathroom stall, took far more of the toilet roll than necessary, and dampened it with the water from the sink. He ignored the stinging pains as he wiped the blood from his hands, arm, and cheek. But it was no good. His cheek persisted to bleed. How bad was that injury? He was so busy in the fight back then that he barely acknowledged it. Okay, now wasn't the time. Turning off the tap, he picked up his mask and wrung it out the best he could before pulling it back over his head to hide the injury. Leaving his cheek piece and the crumpled red tissue in the sink, he skidded back over to the door, unlatched it, and threw it open. "Midoriya, are you—" Shinso started. "No, he said in reply, and charged past him. Shinso just stood there in shock. Midoriya sprinted back into the common room, pushing past the others to find Eri, who was now back in her armchair with Yaoyorozu holding out tissues to her, which she refused to take. "What the fuck?" Shinso swore at the top of his voice in the background after his brain had finally got up. Midoriya could deal with him later. Eri was the priority right now. "I hurt you," she sobbed, her voice all raspy from crying and screaming. Meanwhile, Midoriya's was not, despite its disuse. Perhaps that was all down to Eri's power as well. "I hurt you. I'm a monster," she whined. "A curse." There was a spark at her horn. Those around her panicked, stumbling backwards in surprise. The movement only made her start crying loudly again, the sparks becoming more and more frequent. "Shh, shh," Midoriya whispered, prizing her hands away from her knees. "Let go of me," she said with a sniff. Okay, right. This wasn't going to work. He needed... Midoriya turned his head to meet Shinso's eyes. He was standing at the corner of the crowd. Ida was telling him off for swearing with Eri around, but he was a little more focused on Midoriya at the moment. He turned back to Eri and took a deep breath. He'd been humming this song the entire time, something he'd heard over the radio whilst he was missing. It had stuck in his head whilst he considered what its power would be. When Eri turned up, that was what he thought of, and it is the tune she'd become so familiar with. Of course, she wouldn't understand the words, but all she needed to know, really, was that Midoriya was singing them. "I remember tears streaming down your face when I said I'd never let you go." His classmates around them gasped collectively. Whispers broke out amongst them, but Midoriya ignored them. It was just him and Eri at the moment. He shuffled a little closer to her, gazing at the stars in her eyes as she listened to the song. "I remember you said don't leave me here alone." Midoriya stood up and reached forwards as he sung, scooping Eri up into his arms as her crying grew silent, null, and void. "Just close your eyes." And he did just that, lost in the fact that he was singing again. "You'll be alright. No one can hurt you now." He was smiling, although no one could see it as he spun slowly around the room, Eri in his arms. "You and I'll be safe and sound." That was where he stopped. The song. It was supposed to make her feel safe. Although we couldn't quite know for sure whether his quirk had activated or not, it had done what he needed it to. He lowered her back down onto the nearest sofa. She wiped the tears from her face and stared at him. Moments passed with everyone just staring at him like he'd just come back from the dead. Which wasn't the best analogy because he'd already experienced that type of shock and it involved a lot more tears, but probably an equal amount of swearing. "You have a pretty voice," said Eri. Midoriya laughed. "Thank you." Canary?" Jiro started. Midoriya held out a hand without even looking at her, telling her to wait. "Eri, do you know what your quirk is?" he questioned, sitting down on the sofa beside her. She blinked and then looked down at her hands as if they could hold the answer. I know it's bad." "Not at all," Midoriya contradicted. She turned back to him in clear bewilderment. "Eri,
Your quirk is... well, it's rewind.
Rewind?
Shinzo swore again and Midoriya gave him a look. Sorry, he added, but she reversed you?
Midoriya beamed
And turned back to Eri. Completely undone! He exclaimed, waving his arms about as he spoke in excitement. Absolutely everything!
But you were bleeding.
She frowned. Well, you didn't undo all my injuries, Midoriya explained, running his hand through his hair. So not absolutely everything, I guess, but the main bits, they're all fixed. There's no hole, which is nice, but, I think I pushed out my cheek piece thing into my mouth and I almost choked on it. But I also have a tongue, which is very helpful, but also kind of surprising when you haven't had a tongue for the last 3 weeks or so, because it's a really weird fleshy muscle kind of thing, and this is really weird. It feels so weird. Why is this considered enormous? Oh my god, Midoriya, stop talking.
Shinzo yelled, pulling at his hair. There was a brilliant smile on his face, though.
No! Midoriya contradicted with a grin. Shut up, I'm busy panicking! It was Eri's turn to speak again now, and Midoriya was still trying to figure out how to talk and
Breathe at the same time.
Then why are you bleeding? She insisted. Oh, that was Stain, I think.
Stain?
A villain, he replied before quickly adding, who was surprisingly far better company than any of our friends. At least he had second guesses on whether he should kill me.
Wait, he probably shouldn't have said that. Oh well, she didn't seem too phased.
You need to forget what he told you,
Midoriya insisted, patting her on the head with a smile.
Which I know is hard, but he was wrong. You're not a curse.
But
you're a unicorn, right?
She just blinked at him.
I know you know what unicorns are because you drew a picture the other day. See, look, you have a horn too. That makes you a unicorn.
It does?
She asked, reaching up to her horn uncertainly.
Yep,
he said, popping the beat because he could.
And do you know what a group of unicorns is called?
She cocked her head to one side in confusion.
Midoriya grinned, picking her up again.
You get a pack of wolves and a flock of birds, a herd of horses. So do you know what it is for unicorns?
A herd?
Nope, it's a blessing.
Blessing?
That's what you are, Mrs. Miracle. A blessing, which kind of implies that you are more than one unicorn, but I honestly can't think straight at the moment, so we're just gonna roll with that.
Harry reached forwards and grasped his damp mask. It fell from his face easily, exposing the ugly red of his cheek. He just smiled.
That was when someone leapt forwards and hugged him from behind, which turned out to be Uraraka. Moments later, Jiro joined in, then Shinzo, Todoroki, and even Ida. Everyone else was just crying. Seconds later, so was Midoriya, laughing and crying at the same time.
And through it all, he could have sworn he saw Eri smile.